And
Yes.
in this tradition, Hermes was the one that was a great celebrated figure from the time before the deluge. He just replaces Enoch in the Enochite tradition. And in this case, it then becomes the pillars of Hermes in the Hermetic tradition, and the secrets associated with these pillars were the basis for the Hermetic sciences.
So, what if the Nephilim from the time before the Great Flood not only taught humanity the secrets of civilization, but also left behind hidden tablets that still whisper their forbidden knowledge today? Buckle up, because we are going to take a deep dive into these ancient traditions. And I want to welcome the listeners to this adventure. So, Willie, in Sumerian lore, how exactly do the fallen gods and the Anunnaki link to the giants we read about in Genesis 6? And what role did these beings play as the original Nephilim before the flood?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, because what we find here is the link between Genesis 6 and the ancient traditions about the Nephilim in ancient Sumer. Now, in Genesis 6, we read about the Nephilim. This is one of two passages in the Bible that refers to the Nephilim. Now, in this case, it doesn't mention giants. It just mentioned the Nephilim. And we read that they were, now I read from the New King James, and this translation actually has giants, but it's just the Nephilim. There were Nephilim on the earth, giants on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. So it was before and after the deluge, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Now, the equivalent for the sons of God, which refers to the fallen angels, and we've had long discussions already. The very first video that we produced was about this topic. In ancient Sumer, we have the equivalent in the form of the fallen god. So the fallen gods is the equivalent, and also Anunnaki, just another term for the giants. We've discussed this terminology in various episodes, and it's more particularly the Anunnaki of the earth. So the fallen angels having had children, and those being called Nephilim, we find exactly the same traditions in ancient Sumer, where the gods also had children, and these children were indeed the great and mighty heroes of old, especially with regard to the ancient Uruk tradition. Now, your question refers to the time before the deluge, and according to Sumerian tradition, in that time, it was particularly the Apkallu, the sages, the group of 7 nameless sages that were extremely important. And today we will discuss that, because they were the ones that teach certain secrets and things to the humans during that period. Another group of the Nephilim that was most likely present during that period was the giants. And we've discussed that in our previous episode about the 3 different groups among the Nephilim, the 3 Nephilim orders. So
it's interesting that the Bible actually echoes all of these traditions in Genesis 6.
Absolutely. Genesis 6 provides a summary of the ancient traditions about the Nephilim that we find already in ancient Sumer. For example, in the Sumerian king list, we find this tradition, yes.
And can you just mention how these traditions ended up in the Bible and the reference, just for those guys that don't know? Just a quick line.
Yeah, so I believe that these traditions were handed down in the circles, Abrahamic circles, in the family of Abram, because Abram originated from Ur of the Chaldeans, remember. And God called him, he came from Sumer, and his family brought those traditions with them. And I believe that the source material for the primeval history, that's Genesis 1 to 11, were handed down by the fathers, and eventually the biblical author used that to write down what we find in, for example, in Genesis 6. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. It's interesting that there's the golden thread that runs through everything, but if you look at the Abrahamic traditions and where it ends up in Genesis 6, it just makes sense. It's like pieces of a puzzle that fit together. But Willie, you mentioned Enki's seed producing 8 deities connected to dwarfs, serpents, and figures like Ensag. Can you unpack that creation story and explain how it ties into the broader theme of hybrid, or let's say superhuman beings in the antediluvian age?
The story that you are referring in ancient Sumer, in my opinion, this is one of the most important ancient Sumerian myths regarding the fallen gods and how they came about. And this god, Enki, his name means the Lord of the Earth. He was the god of Eridu in the southern end of Sumer, very much within the marshlands and in the Persian Gulf, because the Gulf at that time reached onto that part of the world. And in this case, we read that his seed fell on the ground. Now, the fallen seed, we've discussed this also in some detail before, is the equivalent of what you find, for example, in Revelation 12, where we read about stars that fell on the ground. So in this case, the seed fell on the ground, and then from that seed, certain plants came up. And when Enki saw these plants, he ate them. And then he became pregnant with these gods, these 8 gods. And eventually, with the help of Nangursa, his consort, she's often described in terms of a serpent. He himself is described as a serpent lying deep in the Apsu. And then they provided these 8 gods, 4 gods and 4 goddesses. And what is interesting in later tradition, we find that Ensag was remembered in Persian Gulf tradition as a giant called Ishnach ben Inak, or that goes back to Ensag, the son of Enki. Now, in my opinion, there cannot be any doubt that this is the basis for the biblical Anak, the Anakites, sons of Anak. So here we have the son of Enoch, and that becomes in the biblical equation in Numbers chapter 13, where we read about the giants, the Anunnaki, the Anak, the Anakim. We find that the Anakim, the sons of Anak, corresponds with the son of Enoch. And Enoch and Anak basically goes back to Enki. So this is where the name originated. So it's the seed of this god that fell on the ground, these fallen gods. This is just a metaphor for the fallen gods, and from whose seed this giant and the other giants then were born. Now, what is interesting, we do not only find this tradition in Sumer, and this is in the Persian Gulf area, because Ensag was especially associated with the island of Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, from where I've argued that this tradition was carried via the Southern Sea route and the Nile Delta, eventually to Canaan. We also find it in
those
Egypt.
migrations that those migrations that took place.
So these traditions were probably brought to Egypt already in a very early period, maybe the end of the Uruk period with the Uruk expansion, and we find exactly the same tradition. We find the earth god, his seed fell on the ground, 4 gods and 4 goddesses were born from that seed. But in that case, we find something interesting. We find a messianic figure that we've also discussed in some detail. We've discussed many of these aspects in quite some detail in the previous episodes. He was a child, and what is interesting about him, his name is called the Pen god. Now, Pen here just stands for like Ben in Hebrew, the son of, the seed. So he was the seed. So what we have here is the opposing views, the biblical view of the seed of the woman, and then we have the seed of the serpent that's referred to in Genesis 6. And this messianic child was called the seed. He was the seed. And from his seed came later traditions, I believe the house of Uruk, for example, most likely was descended from this messianic figure. Then in Egyptian tradition, there was a deluge. The original homeland of the gods was overrun by the water. And then afterwards, certain shamans went back. And we read in the Edfu text in the south of Egypt, and we've discussed the Edfu text also in some detail. So readers, are welcome to go through the different episodes and get the full picture. So what happened in this case is that these shamans, after the deluge, went back to that original place, and there they tried to bring back the gods that lived before the deluge. They had various techniques, etc. And they were able to bring back certain of these gods then, like the 7 sages, like the 7 warriors, which is Septu, called in Egyptian text, Sebitu in Sumerian text, and the builder gods. And among them were the giants, the Ugal, the great spirits.
I just wanted to add, people that are watching this for the first time, just listen to our previous episode. We go into that in absolute detail.
Yeah, so here are the basis for the 3 Nephilim orders. And what is extremely important is a precise equivalence between the Sumerian tradition and the Egyptian tradition. And if we put these two together, we get quite a complete picture of the period before the deluge, when the seed fell on the ground, or the earliest tradition about the fallen gods, and how these earlier gods were brought back to live again via certain rituals and so on. So they clearly believed in reincarnation in this regard. And the Nephilim was, throughout the ages, always closely linked with this idea of certain diamonds that were reborn in their midst. And then this messianic line, he's called the Shining One, and this is, we'll return to the Shining Ones, but this is the basic myth, earliest faith of the Nephilim tradition in ancient Sumer and Egypt.
Absolutely, that's the foundation from which everything else flow. But we're going to now start going into I want to say the meat of things.
Yeah.
So Billy, who were the Uruga, the good shining ones, if you can say that, and the Ugal, the big shining ones in Sumerian tradition? And how did these shining ones actually teach civilization to early humanity before the deluge hit?
Yeah, so what you're now referring to is the terminology is the U or Ut. We've also discussed that previously. Now, Ut usually refers to a day, or a storm, or shining. It can mean any of these things. It actually refers to a certain kind of day. Let's say a stormy day, or a sunny day, or a huge, mighty, powerful day with regard to, say, a massive storm. And these days were associated with certain diamonds. These diamonds or spirits were called the Shining Ones, because this is what this term means. Ut means shining. So they were the Shining Ones. And these diamonds were the ones that were incarnated within the framework of the Nephilim. So we have 3 different groups of diamonds in accordance with the 3 Nephilim orders. And those were according to the 3 different cosmic domains that the Sumerians believed in. So there were the sky. Some of these fallen diamonds were associated with the sky, and also especially with the storm god. Then another group were associated with the Apsu, that's the freshwater sources under the earth, and which was closely linked with Eridu, the seat of Enki. And the 7 sages were regarded as the personification of these days, of these diamonds in human form. And they were regarded as semi-divine, especially in the time before the deluge, and closely associated with Enki. And then there were also those diamonds that were associated with the netherworld, and later on Nergal, he was king of the netherworld. He was the leader of the 7 Sebiti, or the 7 warriors, or these group of 7 diamonds that were closely linked with the warrior order. So these
And very,
diamonds
I
are
just
central to the story about the Nephilim.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just really interesting how we, even in our modern tradition, are steeped in some of these traditions. It's stuff that's flown through or flowed through the ages. You look at seven sages, you look at 7 days.
Yeah, that's
And
quite
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, and what is also
yeah,
important is, for example, the seven sages in the antediluvian period, the time before the
yeah.
deluge. We read that they were involved uh, in ensuring the correct functioning of the plans of heaven and earth. I'm reading from a Sumerian text.
Yes.
The same is said about one of the earliest of these, Uan, which just means the heavenly day. And then later on in the myth of Etana, we read that the great ones, the Anunnaki, deciders of fate, sat in council, the constructors of the four directions, the creators of the creation, planned a plan for the land. So what we find is these Apkallu, these sages, were closely linked. Also, some of them I've discussed that in my first book, Kings of an Epic Age, the Nephilim Kings of an Epic Age. So some of these Apkallu, some of these wise ones were also called Anunnaki. And they were the ones that planned the layout of the land. And if you go to ancient Sumer and ancient Egypt, and I discuss that in quite some detail in this first volume of mine, we find that the earthly design was done in accordance with the celestial sky. And this was the basis from which they planned the land. And then they believed with this incarnation of the Nephilim on earth that the events associated with them would then closely mirror that which happens in the heaven. So this is where the cosmic code comes into play, which is above will
As
also
above, so
happen
below.
on earth. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then what we find is that these sages were said to have taught the humans many things. For example, writing and scholarship, law and government, architecture, agriculture, rituals, religion, crafts, mathematics, astronomy. So the sages were the ones that there's actually an overall term in ancient Sumerian for this. This is the meh. So the meh is all these cultural values, all these things. The sages were said to have taught them to the humans. And then later
Yes.
on in the book of Enoch, this is exactly what we find, that the watchers taught these things. And in this case, for example, metallurgy and warfare, creating swords, knives, all these kind of things, cosmetics, sorcery and magic, astronomy, divination, all these kind of things, that it was the watchers that taught these things to men. This is why certain scholars believe that this idea about the watchers in the book of Enoch was actually borrowed from Babylonian sources going back to the Apkallu, the early Apkallu. So this is where we find this idea that there was a certain kind of knowledge, a secret even knowledge, in the time before the deluge. Yes, before the Great Flood.
Yeah, very interesting. And you look at Berosus as well, was a Babylonian priest of Bel Marduk, and it's the whole Marduk theme. And very, very interesting. So Willie, the Edfu text describes sages burying a sacred reed. And that later became two pillars holding all these antediluvian secrets. How does that Egyptian tradition become the root of the same story? Again, the line that sort of runs through in Plato's Atlantis, as I said, Berosus, the Book of Enoch, and Josephus.
Yeah, so the two pillars, the two antediluvian pillars, that is a fascinating tradition and how that evolved.
Yeah.
Now, what we find in the Edfu texts, I've mentioned these shamans associated with the Nephilim tradition. So when they came back to this original homeland of the gods, from where they traveled to Egypt to build the first temples according to Edfu tradition, when they came back to this original homeland, they went in search for a soul relic, as it's called, from the time before the flood. And then they found this particular reed, and they cut it, and from the one part they made one pillar, and from the other part it's not mentioned what happened to that, but presumably another pillar. That was the origin of the story about the pillars that was produced in the framework of knowledge that came from the pre-flood period to the time after the deluge. Now, later on, we find in Plato, in his story of Atlantis, that he refers to this particular island that was overrun by the sea, and this particular pillar on this island on which these antediluvian secrets were written down. And the people that lived on this island were Nephilim. They were descendants of the gods. Now, he says that a certain Solon had 3 generations earlier heard these things in Egypt. So this tradition that we find that Plato wrote down so much later originated in Egypt. And once you study these 2 traditions, it's immediately clear that this tradition originated with the Edfu texts that we've discussed. So what this means is there was no Atlantis ever. Come on. It comes from this country, this original homeland of the gods in the earlier traditions of Egypt. And this was Sumer. Now, in my opinion, and I give long arguments for that in the first volume of my work. So they brought these traditions from Sumer. And this land which was overrun, it was in this land where this pillar was erected after the deluge. And this is where the story originated. So I don't believe there was an Atlantis, and they will try and find it. They'll never find it, because the story that was written down by Plato goes back to an earlier tradition, which was heard in Egypt. And in that case, it corresponds closely. There cannot be any doubt to the Edfu tradition that was brought in the earliest pre-dynastic times from the original homeland of the gods, which was Sumer. And then later on, Berossus, you've mentioned Berossus, for example, that was in the 3rd century BC, he mentions certain cuneiform texts that survived the deluge. The book of Enoch doesn't really refer to pillars or something exactly like this, but what we do find in the book of Enoch is the astronomical book, and in this astronomical book, we find that Enoch observed certain heavenly tables. Now, this is again in agreement with ancient Sumerian tradition, where we read about the writing in the celestial skies, and where in the Bible even we find the heavenly scroll, the idea of a heavenly scroll in Isaiah and later on in Revelation. So the heavens in some way is a scroll, is like a scroll, and if we can read that, we have access to the secrets of that heavenly language, we can understand that. And we're not talking about Babylonian astrology. We're not talking about that. So we do find elements of that in the book of Enoch. And then later on, the first reference to 2 tablets is actually in the book of Giants. And then still later on, Josephus. He's the first one that refers to 2 pillars. And on these pillars were written down certain secrets from the time before the deluge. And he connects it with the sons of Seth. And because in his view, later on, the daughters of the sons of Seth were the ones with which the fallen angels had children. That was his view. And so he links the Nephilim with them. Yes.
Yeah. And then there's other places where these 2 pillars also feature. Masonic law is one of them. And you look at it's a Jachin and Boaz from Solomon's Temple.
Yeah, exactly.
Referring to 1 Kings. So
they really, apply it in that way. That's 100%.
Yeah.
So what we find is that these traditions were handed over in the circles of these 3 Nephilim orders that was active during that period, the time of Christ, the early Roman period. And in Egypt especially, we have the Hermetic tradition. It originated in early Roman Egypt. And in this tradition, Hermes was the one that was a great celebrated figure from the time before the deluge. He just replaces Enoch in the Enochite tradition. And in this case, it then becomes the pillars of Hermes in the Hermetic tradition. And the secrets associated with these pillars were the basis for the Hermetic sciences. So this was these great secrets from the time before the deluge. Now, these secrets were basically handed down in Nephilim circles through all the ages. It was not really that there was no such pillars, obviously. But the secrets were handed down. And in the case of the Hermetic tradition, we find it's actually mentioned that it is connected with the diamonds. In my new book, hopefully later this year, it will be published, of Stone Fallen from Lucifer's Crown. I actually discussed this in quite some detail. So these diamonds in Greek tradition, we had, for example, certain diamonds associated with the oracles. So there were certain, female virgins that spoke inspired terms and said certain things about the future, and it was believed that it was the diamonds that inspired them. We also find the diamonds active in the secrets of the mystery religions, and that the initiates in those religions were believed to be possessed by the diamonds. And one of the important aspects of these cults, for example, the Eleusinian cult, was the sacred marriage ritual by which they tried to get these diamonds to be reborn again in human form. And then some of the Greek authors, Hesiod, for example, mentions that the diamonds go back to the great heroic kings of the Golden Age, and that it was the guardian spirits. Now, this is exactly what I believe. These diamonds that we've discussed, these shining ones, they, in later tradition, were regarded as the guardian spirits of certain early kings, for example, that of Uruk. And these are the kings that were regarded as Nephilim.
Yeah. Billy, so that's the older traditions, but do you think there's still some small little fragments of that knowledge today? And where would we find that if that's the case?
So what we're talking about is basically the occult tradition. Everything pertaining to the occult tradition. So in occult circles, this tradition is alive and well, and it has survived throughout the ages, had been handed down, and the stream within which it was handed down was the Nephilim. Nephilim traditions was closely linked to the Nephilim traditions, and I've mentioned the seed, the Messianic seed, in the time before the deluge. And after the deluge, the house of Uruk were the primary ones of this Nephilim lineage, from which this particular line continued. And we have other messianic figures later on in this tradition. I believe next time we'll discuss this theme, the Nephilim messiahs. And later on, eventually, certain of the bloodlines that continue through the ages are these messianic bloodlines. And they believe that in future, one of them will again be a great emperor, because closely linked to these bloodlines are the great emperors. For example, the Akkadian emperors were believed to have been from these Nephilim bloodlines.
It'll be a political figure.
Yeah, the Elui family of Rome, Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus, they were regarded as Nephilim and from these bloodlines. So these greatest figures of all time in human tradition were regarded as being born from this seed, from this line. And this is also what we expect to happen again in future. And it's linked with the cosmic code, and we will still discuss that.
That's also something for a later discussion, yes. Next time we'll look at the ancient Nephilim Messiah. But Willie, thank you very much for that. all of your research, and if you read the books and stuff, it doesn't just connect the dots. It just paints this very wonderful, clear picture, and it's absolutely fantastic. And it just shows us that the giants and the shining ones weren't just myths; they were very interesting architects of the world we inherited. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Any other comment? A final comment, thought?
No, I think it's a fascinating theme, and we have divided it in 9 ages. So we're discussing these traditions, and we go slowly to allow all the listeners to really get a good idea of how all these things fit together. Because once we understand how all these things work, then we can go and discuss more certain things in more detail and more sophisticated and interesting aspects, like the messianic figures, like the cosmic code. And today's discussion already, we needed a lot of background information, which was provided in previous episodes. And I would really ask the listeners, if you have not yet done it, to listen to the previous episodes and inform yourself.
Absolutely. And I do have a question for the listeners. If you look at these two pillars and you had to take a guess, what single piece of forbidden knowledge do you think was written on those pillars that could perhaps impact the course of humanity? I want to challenge people. Come up with your wildest theory and just DM us, or in the comments, just throw it in there. It would be interesting.
Yeah, and leave a comment and tell us.
Yeah, and have fun with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Willie, and I look forward to the next episode.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.